Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, the second line from the top. Continuing on with the discussion about inferior mechitzas that do not have both shesi and erev, do not have both vertical and horizontal strips. So we have limitations in the use of what size of an area one can carry when surrounded by these inferior partitions. Sometimes, if there are three people, now even though three people, in general terms, we say it's considered a shayara, caravan, and it's mutter, but he says sometimes you can have three people, bechomesh, and even though the area enclosed is only 5 saw, then it's also. B'sheva mutar, and sometimes that if it encloses an area of 7 saw, it's mutter. So sometimes it encloses a smaller area, it's only 5 saw, and it's also. Sometimes it's 7 saw, and it's mutter. So they asked for a gidul, did Rav say this? It seems to be a pellet. He said, said by the Torah and the Vim Ksuvim, yes, he did say it. So, Amar Ravashi, my kasha, what's difficult? Why is this a pellet to you? Dil Mahachikam. Maybe this is the pshat. If there are 3 people. Now, generally we say that each person is allotted an area of 2 saw, allotted an area of 2 saw to carry with, and it can close an area of sasaim, of 2 saw. So maybe the pshat is that if it's then if they needed the area that they need was 6 saw, and they surrounded an area of 7 saw, afil b'shem mutar, then it's mutar, because as we learned previously, the problem is if you have an area of 2 saw, if you have an area of 2 saw that's open, that's not being used, there we say that nullifies the mechitzas, and the mechitzas are no longer valid. These inferior mechitzas, if they close an area, and if there's 2 saw in the area, that are left empty, then we say that then the mechitzas are no longer valid. So perhaps what it means over here is that if it was 6 bid, if they needed an area of 6 saw and they encompassed a circle an area of 7, so there's 1 saw that is empty, but not 2. So then we say, then it's mutter. And then it's mutter, even though there's 1 saw extra, but there's not sasayim, so then it's mutter. But if the area that was needed for the 3 people is only 5, and they use the mechitzas to surround an area, to enclose an area of 7, so now it has 2 saw, an area of 2 saw that are not used, that are being empty, that are empty over there, then then even the 5 are also nullifies the entire mechitzas, because since you have this area, this large area, which is not being used, it nullifies the mechitzas completely, and they can't even carry within the area of 5 saw. We learned you can't have a vacant area of Beis Hasayim, 5,000 square amas, you can't have vacant. So my love, ponami adam. Doesn't this mean ponami adam? Meaning, the Gemara is assuming the kasha is that we automatically allocate sasaim to a person. So therefore, if you have 3 people, no matter what they use, how much they use or they don't use, we say 2 saw is allocated to a person, that's 6 saw. You can't have 2 saw which is vacant, meaning which is unallocated. Therefore, the Gemara is assuming the kasha, as long as the area that these inferior mechitzas are surrounding is less than 8,000 amas, you can carry over there, because if you allocate automatically 2 saw per person is 6, and as long as it's less than 8, you don't have 2 saw which are vacant. So you don't have this scenario where it encloses 7, no matter even if they only use 5, but as long as it's not up to 8, it should be mutter. The Gemara says, that's not what it means. We don't automatically allocate 2 saw per person. We allocate according to their use. So each person has up to 2 saw, provided he's using it. So that therefore it it is the pshat is that, like we learned before, if you can have a scenario where you have 3 people and chomesh is a surah. How is that? That we say that if they're only using 5, we don't automatically allocate 2 saw per person. It's up to their use. So if the 3 people are only using 5 saw and they circle an area, these inferior mechitzas are enclosing an area of 7, you have 2 saw which are not being used, and therefore it nullifies the mechitzas completely. But if they are using it, if and if they need the 6 and they enclose an area of 7, you don't have 2 saw which are not being used, and therefore it's mutter. Itma, we learned shleisha u'meisachad mehem, if there were 3 people. So at the beginning of Shabbos there are 3 people together, and it enclosed an area of a more than a base saw, or more than 2 saw rather. So like we learned earlier that 1 or 2 people are limited in what they can carry. It's up to 2 saw. If it's 3 people, it's like a sheyara, and they have a larger area. Now, how do we look at it? If it's shleisha meisachad, if there were 3 people on the onset of Shabbos, it enclosed an area of more than 2 saw, and 1 died on Shabbos, or shnayim, or if there were 2 people at the onset of Shabbos, and one of them joined them on Shabbos. How do we look at it? We view it as a situation on the onset of Shabbos, and that's what's kaveh, that's what determines whether it's considered 2 or 3 people, or do we look at it at the situation asher usham, right now on Shabbos, are there 2 people or 3 people? Rav Huna v'Rav Yitzchak Chad Amar Shabbos Gairemes. One says that they argue on Rav Huna v'Rav Yitzchak. One says that it's Shabbos which causes it, meaning we look at the situation on the onset of Shabbos, and that's what determines if we consider it to be 2 or 3 people. And the other one says that you determine it based on the number of people at a particular time, and if it changes on Shabbos, we look at it at the situation at the moment, at this time, right now, how many people are there, so that it can change during the course of the Shabbos. At some point in Shabbos would be 3 people, or some people, sometimes 2 people. So that's machlekes. More says it's time to Rav Huna Huda Amar Shabbos Gairemes. It's mistarba to say that Rav Huna is the one that says that Shabbos is kaveh. We look at the situation as it exists on the onset of Shabbos. The Omer Rabbah, because Rabbah said, boy me Rav Huna, he said he asked Shalom from Huda, boy me Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda, Erev derech Pesach, v'nistam Pesach. If you have 2 chatzeres, there's a wall between them. And they can't make an Erev unless there is a doorway or a window that is at least daled by daled, and therefore you have a window or door that have access to each other, and therefore they can consider to be joined, and you can make an Eruv between the 2 chatzeres, you can join them together. Now, let's say they had this Pesach, or they had the Erev Derech Pesach, V'nistam Pesach, and the door got closed on Shabbos, or Derech Chaloin, a window, V'nistam Chaloin, and it was through a window, and the window got sealed up on Shabbos. So right now, you don't have an opening to join the 2 together. So how do we look at the situation? Do we look at it at the onset of Shabbos, it had a Pesach, it had a window, and they could be merged? Or do we look at, right now on Shabbos, they're not connected? V'amar li said Shabbos, Shabbos, once we say it's mutter, so if it was mutter at the onset of Shabbos, it was considered an Erev, it's a valid Erev for the rest of the Shabbos this time. So you see clearly that Rav Huna says is that Shabbos is Kaveya. We look at it that Shabbos is Kaveya, what the situation is, it determines the situation as it exists on the onset of Shabbos. Lema Rav Huna Rav Yitzchak Rav Yitzchak. Well, let's say Rav Huna and Rav Yitzchak, whether we say Shabbos Kaveya or the Yurna Kaveya, let's say it's the same machlekes as the following machlekes between Rav Yosi and Rav Yehuda. This now we learned in the Mishnah, if you have a chaltzer, it had the walls of the chaltzer. it is broken on two of its walls. So now it doesn't have the proper walls to separate it from the Rishus HaRabim. It's missing the walls from the Rishus HaRabim. Or a house that also on the two sides of it was broken open. As the Gemara later on will explain, when we say two walls, the Gemara on Daf Tzadi Dalet explains, we say two walls, we really mean on the corner. It's on the corner. Now, we're not talking where the break was more than 10 amas. If the breach was more than 10 amas, then it's not considered to be a Pesach, it's considered to be a Pirza, and even one wall would affect it. Here we're talking about was less than 10, but it was 10 amas, was on the corner. Now, as we say, that even though normally less than 10 amas we consider it a Pesach, but a Pesach, but Keren Zovis on a corner, people don't make a Pesach on a corner. They make a Pesach in the middle of the wall, but not on the corner. Therefore, over here, even if it's less than 10 amas, it's not considered a Pesach. It's considered a Pirza if it's two walls. In addition, Rashi says that if it's a house, we're talking where it's not a flat roof, because if it had a flat roof, you'd say Pitikra Yored V'Soisam, we would view it as an imaginary wall to come down and close it. So if you have this scenario, or you have a Chen Movish and It'l Keroisa V'Lachayim, or a mavli that had a heter with a kaira lechi, and on Shabbos it was removed. Mutar and loisa Shabbos, we say it's mutar for that Shabbos, but asuram lost it. But for the following Shabbos, it's only mutar for that Shabbos, but not for the next Shabbos. Diva Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. So apparently, Rabbi Yehuda would be holding that the Shabbos is kaveya. We look at the situation on the onset of Shabbos, and on the onset of Shabbos, it was completely mutter to carry, and therefore, he can continue carrying for that Shabbos, but not for the next Shabbos. But Rav Yossi says, Im mutarim loisa Shabbos, mutarim loisa lova. You can't differentiate between this Shabbos and the next Shabbos. If they're mutter for this Shabbos, then they're mutter for the next one. V'masrim loisa lova. But if you're telling me that for the next Shabbos, the future Shabbos, that it's also, then asrim loisa Shabbos, it's also for this Shabbos as well. So therefore, he says it's also. So apparently, what are we saying over here? That according to Rabbi Yehuda, we say Shabbos is kaveya. And according to Rav Yossi, we say, no, you look at the situation, Basher Husham, we look at the situation as it exists, and it can fluctuate and change during the Shabbos. So, Rav Huna Damar Rav Yehuda, let's say Rav Huna holds like Rav Yehuda, Rav Yisrael Damar Rav Yossi. Amar Lach Rav Huna says, no. Anu Damar Afila Rav Yossi. He says, I can hold even according to Rav Yossi. Why is that? Because I can like Rav Yossi Hasam El the lesson Mechitzas. Why did Rav Yossi say that it's also for this Shabbos? Because you're missing the Mechitzas. Aches no the Mechitzas. Over here, there's no change in the Mechitzas. Over there, there's a breach in the Mechitzas. So he says, Al Korcha, the situation changed. But over here, in our discussion over here, it's not a situation where the Mechitzas change. The number of people changed. Perhaps over there, he would be minded. Rav Yitzchak Amar, Anodar Mefil Rav Yehuda. Rav Yitzchak said, I could hold even according to Rav Yehuda. Why is that? Ad kan loy kam Rav Yehuda Hasam al disno the Europe. Rav Yehuda said over there it's only mutter for the Shabbos because there's no change in the status of the residents. But over Hachal, that's not of the Urim. But over here, there's a change in the residence. Meaning, just because you hold that a change in the Mechitza affects it or it doesn't affect it, that won't necessarily determine whether there's a change in the residence and the Diurim, whether it'll affect it or not. So Chum say that a Mechitza is valid even if it has Shasi or Erev. It doesn't have to have both. It's valid even if it has one or the other. That's exactly what the Tanakama said. What are the Chum saying any different? The Tanakama also said it's valid. More answers, the difference is, the nafkamina between them is if it's a yachid, if it's an individual and he's not traveling. Now they both say that it's mutter, an inferior partition is mutter. But the Tanakama says is that it's only mutter for a yachid if he's traveling. If he's there, they were mekel and they were mater. And now the Chum say, it's mutter even if you're not traveling, even if he's not traveling on the road. It's still mutter for a yachid. He still holds it's mutter. Dr. Mishnah, we're talking about a different type of halachas right now. We're talking about kulas were made. Previously we talked about kulas for a shayora, for a caravan, people who were traveling. And here also we're talking about other kulas not related to the previous discussion, other kulas that we're talking about for people who are, so to speak, traveling, who are in a machna. So what does the Mishnah say? There are 4 things that in an army camp, in a machna, that they made 4 kulas. We talked about kulas before by a machna, shiara. By an army, there are kulas. What are the kulas? The soldiers can bring wood from other places, and it's mutter, and even though normally it would be gzela, they were matret, they can bring wood and use it for their needs, even though they're taking it from other people's trees. And they parted them from the tils yadayim, from washing their hands before they eat. And even though Rabbanan said that purchasing the tvua from an amaretz, a person has to be mafresh meisers, they were makmir, and they were choishish that the amaretz was not mafresh the meisers, and therefore purchasing from amaretz, you're required to be mafresh meisers. In a machna, in an army camp, they don't have to be mafresh the meisers from that type of tvua. And they parted them from making an erev. We'll see in the Gemara what type of an erev. If a camp, an army camp, goes from Mechamas Rishus, it's not a Mechamas Mitzvah, it's not the Kibush of Eretz Yisrael. It's discretionary war. Mutarim begezel eitzim yivation. They're allowed to bring dry wood. They're allowed to bring even dry wood. Even dry wood, which is normally used for fuel, and the owner was going to use it for firewood, they're still allowed to bring it, and there's no Isser Gzela. Rabbi Yehuda ben Taima Omer Avchainim b'chol makam. They can camp anywhere, everywhere, even on private property. And if they're killed in that place, they're buried in that place. And they're not moved to another place, and even though it's private property, they're buried in that place. So the first halach is mutar begezel eitzim yivation. They are permitted to take dry wood, even dry wood. Well, this is a free dikatakana. Yeshua made this takana much earlier. Yeshua made 10 times when he divided Eretz Yisrael amongst the Shvatim. He made 10 conditions, and what is one of them is that they can graze their animals in private property and wooded areas. And they can gather the wood from the fields. So this is a takana of Yeshua already. More answers, there's a chilik. When Yeshua said it was mutter, he didn't mean it from trees, from large trees. He meant it from bushes that the owners are normally not machshav and don't value. So those type of branches from the thorn bushes or low bushes, that you could take. But here they were mattered even by trees. Alternatively, there by Yeshua, he was mattered when there was mechuborim, it was growing from the ground, it was still attached. Meaning, so it was not oimed to be used for firewood. But lushim, here they're mattered even if it's detached, and the owner is apparently going to be using their designated for his own personal use for firewood, still the soldiers can take it. Inami Hasan Balachim, or another teretz says over there by Yeshua, it's talking where they're moist, so they're not oimid for firewood. But B'yaveshim, here it's dry, it's even dry ones that are oimid for firewood, even that you can take. Rabbi Yehuda ben Taima he said they can even camp anywhere, even on private property. So it's a meis mitzvah. Meis mitzvah is kind of a kaima anywhere, anytime. It's not only by a camp, it's not only by an army. A meis mitzvah, a person he died, he's unattended, he's kind of a kaima. It says over here, the heter is, even if he has people to bury him, he has kaivrim, still and he technically would not be considered to be a mace mitzvah, but by an army camp he's kind of a and the Gemara. We'll see this discussion further on the next Amud.